Welcome to the Curt and John Talk Tech and AI podcast. I'm your host, Curt Robbins. I've been a senior technical writer for more than 30 years, and my esteemed co host, John Bailey from Las Vegas, is a biztech marketing and sales expert. Is that John? Is that the three bullets you'd put under your name? I don't want to mislead people.
First of all, I love the polished intro. No. Well, yes and no, right? BizTech, I guess that would describe it.
Which is ambiguous, biztech. What the heck is that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting. If I were to scale it down to three words, I guess BizTech is good, AI and ML, and executive coaching. I don't know. I guess I just would never come
No,
down to
you're
three
right.
words.
You're right. Yeah, I screwed up by not including coaching or executive coach. Leadership. Leadership is another. Yeah, if you don't get leadership in there, you don't totally understand John Bailey because, follow you for a week and you're gonna see some leadership stuff. So, yeah,
Probably be a little ruffled as
I
well.
just kind of
And
stuffed you into sales and marketing, just like, what the heck?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, most people know, even more so that I'm this weird guy that says like I really don't like sales, like I hate sales, but not in the sense of what that sounds like, right? I know we're always selling ourselves. Marketing and advertising is totally about sales. Is that what I mean? I guess I mean like that sleazy, greased back hair, like
Right. Used
salesman
car
type of sales,
salesman.
right? So
Yeah.
when I hear sales, I have this weird trauma around it because it's generally, I guess, like the sales of men of today. It's interesting. I wrote like an article yesterday about this, but like the salesmen of today are not what they were when I was growing up, at least not in the 80s, and 90s. It's evolved a lot. So I guess because I come from this younger trauma related trigger to it, I go, ooh, sales, no, that dump me,
Right.
don't ever
Right.
refer to. I guess we're always selling ourselves, at least in our business, right? We represent
True.
ourselves. We are client based and agency based or contract based, and so that is a lot of sales, right? We're selling ourselves. We're selling myself
That's
as a
right. Every
product.
day.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, no.
Well,
So, yeah, thank you for the, no, I mean, all is what relevant and all makes sense. I just wasn't prepared for that. You knocked me off my
yeah,
track.
I pulled the rug from under you on that
Nice
one. That
audible.
was that was my bad. Um, and and so many of the IT professionals I've worked with over the last 30 plus years do not really understand sales, right? Like they'll kind of venture into marketing just a little, they'll dip a toe in those waters, but they don't really understand sales. So I have another friend in Florida who I've known for decades, and he is also one of those who understands sales a little better than everyone else. And so I don't do it full time. And I hear you with the stigma because there is a lot of stigma, right?
Mm,
Like just that word sales is like a trigger for a lot of people, and they're walking out of the room as soon as you say it, right? But I think understanding where the rubber meets the road and that there's always good players and bad players, but to not allow the bad players and the shysters and the fly by night charlatans, to overly taint our perception of sales because I've had good salespeople, you've had good salespeople. Like it can be done with class and professionalism,
hmm
and even though it doesn't always manifest that way, I just think it gives perspective to one's understanding of, okay, what do you do? I'm a technical writer, I'm a network administrator, I'm a software developer, and I work for this big insurance company and we sell insurance. Okay, all right.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know but kind of understanding where the sales and marketing works into that, and like in the case of an insurance company, uh, what is the day of an agent, right? Where does
hmm
the rubber meet the road and the product or service actually get sold to the client or customer and generate revenue flow? And so that's why I've always appreciated talking to you and other people who are sales savvy, because you understand it. Whether you practice it on the daily or not is not necessarily the issue.
No, absolutely. And I think the way that we sell as a business or a brand or a service-based business, yeah, I think all in all, it's changed. That whole landscape has evolved. We came from the door-to-door Kirby vacuum salesman, of the 50s and 60s and even earlier than that, where, to get that message out, it was like getting somebody at your door, like not everybody picked up the newspaper, not everybody listened to the radio, like you
Right.
would, and everything was a little bit more, a lot less access was, and now what we have access everywhere. I mean, you could find me anywhere, anytime, even if you aren't subscribed to I like to listen to music sometimes when I go to sleep, or something to get me into a relaxing state. And if you, for example, if I don't subscribe to YouTube Premium, YouTube Red, I'm going to hear ads in between my meditation or some kind of like down tempo music, or
So
um
soothing.
so yeah. And so like, and it's funny because sometimes I like to listen to weird, I'm gonna let this one out. I like to listen to Alan Watts, and I love listening to Alan Watts at night, very much so. He has these long lectures that are, his voice is super soothing. I love his laugh. It's just that, like, I would have loved to have been a fry on the wall back in the, when he was doing these big lectures. um in the 70s, and those big classrooms. But we get the pleasure of hearing all the recordings. It's funny, dude, the recordings about people coughing and, some things here and there, but for the most
Right.
part, like, I love his context, I love everything he says. And but I'm not subscribed to YouTube Red because I don't do much else other than inspirational, or some of my podcasts I like to watch. Sometimes I like to watch them on video or different things like that, but like, I don't do the TV part, I don't do the music part, right? So like, it's not a cost that I like to swallow on that level. And, tips of YouTube, if you just had maybe a streaming service that was for that stuff, I don't know. I'm not going to teach you how to diversify your content, but for the most part, you get to serve
Right.
ads to me. And it always breaks the concentration, right? It would be like 40 minutes into this really cool lecture, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, do you want to like scale your business? And I'm like, oh my gosh, first of all, you targeted me, so
Yeah.
now you're pulling my mind into my world, and
You
I
get
was
like
trying
a
to get out of
Geico
that world,
ad
right?
when you're on the verge of falling asleep. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Not
mean, you're
not
selling
good.
us everywhere. And so sales is definitely much more of a different word today. So, I don't take offense. Absolutely not. I am no business of sales for sure, right? Like, if you're brand marketing, if you're working on your branding, you're working on your company structure, your culture, ads, the logo on the t-shirt, it's all selling something, right? It's all selling the business, selling the brand in some way. And
Right.
so, for sure, in sales. But you're right, people don't think about it that way when they hear sales. I guess we all have our different feelings or interpretations around it. So that's, I guess, maybe that's why it comes up for me, because like, I could say branding, but that's a container. It's smaller, right? It's just the color and the
A
logos and the
subset for
lines.
sure. Yeah.
I could say sales or advertising. I could say marketing strategy. It's so I'm in all of that stuff. How about that? I'm a seasoned executive, spent many time in different departments and roles in businesses, and I bring a lot to the table. So, as a coach, I'm not just a coach. I'm not just like, hey, let's figure out what's not working. That stuff's definitely involved. However, I'm also like a solutions oriented coach. Like, I know where to steer you. I know how to vet the digital agency you might be looking at. I know how to vet the technology app builder that you're looking at. Because I've seen it. I know what success looks like, and I know what success does not look like. And so, I guess I'm a little bit more intense. I don't like the word consultant either. Advisor sounds cool. I'm
Consultant.
just
Yeah.
I'm just here with you, man. I'm just doing stuff. But yeah, I'm dipping my head right now in tech and AI and ML. That's what we're talking about. Um, but as well as I bring mindset into it. Let's change your mind about stuff. So that's where I'm at. I guess
Yeah.
that's why this conversation's happening, right? Let's shift some
Yeah.
mindsets around sales.
There are helpful tools out there, and it's not always a situation of your boss or your client coming to you and saying, "Hey, we would like you to use this tool, so please, get smart on it and let's begin integrating it into our workflow." That like I see it's advantageous to be a self-starter in the age of AI
Mm,
because
yes.
new tools are coming out so quickly. And I think the reason people listen to us and other AI podcasts is because we introduce them to tools that can actually help them do their job with little time and little money, right? And we're talking Adobe Firefly, we're talking Ideogram, we're talking Chat GPT, Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini. There's a variety of tools out there, but it's complicated. I mean,
Hmm.
don't you think it's kind of like I feel like I can barely keep up?
Oh, it's not even keep up. That even once you're in, you could be in it and completely not looking at something else that also could be the solution. So yeah, having people that can have a little bit I would say for most people the job isn't to keep up, like, please, business owners out there, don't spend a lot of time trying to keep up with everything that's moving. Get somebody in your organization, get somebody like Kurt or myself, that knows the landscape, but isn't going to compromise whatever productivity or something that's going on in your organization or your business or your brand that's going to limit success somewhere else, right? Like, I think it's
Yeah,
crucially important to understand that you don't have to do everything yourself. I've learned this lesson resoundingly through my years of being an entrepreneur and going and sitting in workshops and weekend retreats and all kinds of stuff with other leaders that are amazing and much more powerful than me right now, or just that next level that I'm looking to get. I'm going to seek somebody that's a little bit further down the journey. And one thing I've heard nonstop at that higher levels of when you climb is go find other people to do the things that take time off of your plate, to take your ability to not scale or not pursue or not look at those data analytics properly, and
right,
it causing you shortcuts because you're over here trying to like chase that shiny light bulb. And it's like, nah, don't do that. Yes, of course, read the headlines. Of course, maybe if you, especially if you're a technology company or you're in a certain field that obviously
right.
is in high demand, of course, you're going to keep your pulse on it. But I think that you steward a few people in your organization to be the stewards of those conversations. And then, or you have a really good advisory, a really good consultancy, or you have a really good coach to bring those things also to your plate to hear your problem and bring you the things that you should focus on rather than you fire hosing. I love that we use fire hosing a lot.
Right.
That open tap of all kinds of information because it's just rabbit hole stuff. I mean, think about how much we talk about AI. A lot of rabbit hole stuff comes to these conversations every week, like throughout the week to prepare just for the discussion. I mean, I'm just poring over so many just news headlines and news bits about AI and tech and trying to see like what's relevant, like what do I need to pay my attention to, what
Right.
don't I, like what's on my no list, like I don't need to focus on that right now. That's not the micro movements is where you could lose yourself, and sometimes you need to see some big strokes first. So
Yeah.
yeah, 100%, you're on point.
Yeah, very, very good observation. And I would advise listeners if you want to know a little more about some of those tools and some of that efficiency, check out last week's bonus episode where I
Mm.
used a scenario of, I think it was a 260-page research study I found. And I was like, I made the joke that it wouldn't take 17 hours to read it, but it would take a while, right? It would take multiple hours to read it, especially if you're taking notes and thinking and comparing sections and going back. If you're really trying to absorb that information, that takes a little while. And I didn't have the proverbial 17 hours, and so I fed the research study to Google's NotebookLM, and it summarized it for me in an audio product that took me about 14 minutes to listen to, I think. And obviously,
Beautiful.
that did not give me the detail. It did not give me the granularity of the 260-page study, but it allowed me to grok it, so to speak. No pun intended, but it
Hmm.
allowed me to say, what is this study all about, and what did it conclude, and how did it do it? And I was able to get all of that. I was able to get everything that I felt I needed out of it, but I didn't have to spend 4 hours reading the thing. So that's just, as you were saying earlier, whether that's a staff member and you delegate that to free yourself up for executive decision making and strategic work,
Hmm.
right? Or whether you hand it to Notebook LM from Google, regardless, they're tools in the toolbox. And you're right, you understand executive leadership a lot better than I do, but I am obsessed with efficiency and productivity and time management. And in terms of AI, which we talk about so much here, I believe these AI tools allow small companies and entrepreneurs like us to do a lot more with a lot less. And when I say less, I mean time and money.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not even to take away. I love last week's bonus episode because it's not even to take away from the original writer's purpose and that long read that you wanted to disseminate down. The purpose is, even when I read an article, if someone just got the point of the article, that's all that matters, right? That's the win. I don't care that you read all
Right.
1,400 words, 1,200 words, 800 words. Did you get the message? Did I land my purpose? And if it means that you have to like go and plug that into an AI to kind of like get that like I don't want to say the cliff notes because the cliff notes is like a summarization, right? But like get the key takeaways. Like when you use those prompts, right? Say, hopefully you have a conversational AI that's already kind of open and you've given it a little bit more context into who you are and what you're really looking for. So I'd say first start there, right? Start a conversation where you say, hey, I'm Jim, and I'm 15 years in product development, and and this has been my journey. Upload your resume, I don't know, just put enough information in so
Right.
that the AI conversation understands who you are, and then say, okay, now I want to sit down and read this, but I don't have the time. Here's what I'm looking for when I read something like this. I'm looking for key takeaways. I'm looking for gems I can use. I'm looking for applicable like resources that I can put into my business or my company or my current team because they're struggling with X, Y, and Z. Read this article and tell me what I could learn, and then boom, just extract what you would have already done if you did sit down for that whole
Exactly.
weekend and read all those words.
Yep.
Just let the AI do it for you, and at the end of the day, I imagine if you went back to the reader and say, hey, this is what I learned this and this, I applied these four methodologies, my team got out of the dirt and they back in on track within 1 week, thank you so much. That reader is not going to say, but did you read all the words? Did you listen to the
Exactly.
whole thing?
Yeah. Who
No,
cares?
no, like that's not the point. The point is to get the
It's
message out
not.
and help people move forward in most things that we're writing, or people that are writing, especially in your field, technical writing. Like it's a lot of information. So it doesn't mean that the information shouldn't exist the way it is in its natural state. We just want to see if we can get it diluted down. And then actually, the other part is that what we're seeing in AI all across all kinds of very big, heavy data analytics is that it catches things that we miss. It catches things that we wouldn't have maybe got. Maybe you weren't
Right.
in the right mindset. Think about that read, Kurt. If you'd have sat down all weekend, but on Saturday you were completely checked out, you would have read the words, but they wouldn't have landed. You'd have been,
Right.
maybe distracted. I'm hungry, so like I'm only thinking about that sandwich, but I got to get through these 2 pages because I said I would. You're not paying attention. You're not actively
Yeah, you're
reading.
missing the
You
patterns, you're
know?
missing the significance and the relativity. Yeah.
Yeah,
And the
so these
yeah.
tools are not just going to shortcut the things if when you use them the way that you could. It's leveraging it's like leveraging an extension of your mind, if you can see it that way. If you can see that you take the time, you train an AI, you train a conversation, you give it a little context. And I encourage everybody. I have a soon to be going on 10-year-old daughter, and a lot of times we go through,
Uh-oh.
let's say math homework, for example, right? One of the biggest things I feel like something is missing in this generation of my soon to be 10-year-old is that they don't have a scratch piece of paper. He's like constantly like, I don't know how to solve this problem. She got scribbles all over the paper. And I'm like, why are you trying to solve the problem on the paper, right? Like, I get that you have to show your work. So please, let's make sure that however you finally get to the answer, whatever that formula that you did, or that way approach to the math that you did to solve the problem finally, you're going to bring that back to the paper, sure, but you got to have a scratch piece of paper. And I'd say in our digital age, anything I read, I always have a doc open that I'm actively taking notes on something, right? If it's not
Oh,
my
okay.
notes in my phone, it's a Google Doc that's open as a tab, or
Yep.
maybe
Yep.
on another screen, or a little small window down at the bottom I can click on. And if I caught a note, I just write it down real quick and keep going, write it down and
Yeah.
keep going, right?
Yeah,
And then
Google
later
Docs is
on,
great for that,
yeah, and then
and
just put
you
my
can get it
notes.
from all your devices, seamlessly share it with your colleagues, friends, and family.
Yeah.
It's some great stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so then you take all that notes, right? You take all those learns, then you copy and paste it into the AI and you say, learn this too.
Yeah.
This is also the things I found most interesting about this. This is also things that I pulled out of this, so that it starts to learn how you are interpreting words, or interpreting words, like what you're really looking for versus like what the other guy's looking for. Because if you leave it up to its let's say
Right.
foundational training, the way that it was trained when it was learned, it's going to give you that surface. So
Yeah.
I yeah.
Because
um
your pain points are unique and generic answers are helpful and insightful, but they don't necessarily help you reach your particular business goals with your particular business, right?
Not really.
And that's where I really like that. If we talking about takeaways earlier, if the listeners today, if their takeaway is you can use AI and AI tools to, the goal hasn't changed, right? The goal is fix the pain point regardless of the tool, right? We get overwhelmed by the tool, but the goal is fix the business pain point. Just like it's 1945, there was no AI in 1945, but we had tools available to us to fix our business pain points, and smart business people did that, and not smart business people did not do it so well, and they went out of business, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All too often, I think people, it's like I was actually telling you recently, and we're gonna probably touch base on this, but I'm jumping into a new AI driven platform, right? I'm checking it out for the first time based on your recommendation. I'm I immediately just start playing with it, and then I step back and I go, this warrants a little bit more preparation and time that I originally anticipated. I have to stop here. 'Cause if I keep going, I miss something. If I keep going, I'm not gonna see maybe the
Right.
tool, or maybe I do need to take the guided toolkit tour, or I need to, maybe if a platform offers a few videos, watch them so that I make sure I'm not missing something. Because even what I found recently using some new features on another platform is that I'm going around it the hard way. I guess maybe I did, so I didn't. So I my point is, like, to prepare. Sometimes you have to step back and go, like a fighter would before they stepped in the arena. They would pray, they would prepare, they'd train, they'd look at that other fighter's like videos and tape and kind of like
Right.
see what they can anticipate. And I think that's in everything we're doing these days. It's why, most importantly, I've been on tech teams where we sat back and said, we need a walkthrough for this. We need a tutorial for this. We need something. Even just if it was a new app, it was like, even just when they first logged in, it grayed out the rest of the screen and just highlighted it, like, here, start here, start here, start here, put your name here, you ready to go, cool. Because some things require that, some things require a little bit
Right.
more, otherwise you're just like throwing them into a maze and saying good luck.
Well,
um
and they don't know if it's simple or complex, right? So even
yeah.
though it might be 7 steps, for all they know, it's 700 steps. And
Hmm.
there's psychological and emotional apprehension that comes with that, right? And we've
Yeah.
talked before on this podcast about technophobia and the
Hmm.
idea that there are many humans out there, and often they're in IT, whether that's ironic or not, right? But they are technophobic. And I've seen examples of this repeatedly among colleagues and family, where a manager of a coffee shop, for example, would tell an IT technician to turn off new functionality that could really benefit the
Wow.
employees and the business,
Hmm.
because it was complicated. It was tech. It's that scary tech stuff. Keep it away from me, right?
Mm.
Literally, people have visceral negative responses to technology, especially changes in technology, where they barely had a hold on the old way of doing it, and now you're changing it up. So no wonder they're freaking out, right? Because they're like, no, and if they have the power, uh, they sometimes walk away from those technical solutions, which is not necessary, which is probably not good for the business, right? Like,
Hmm.
if there was advantage in that tool or service. So yeah, it's we got technophobia, but it sounds like you were doing a nice segue into Jellypod, which is something we've talked about. I think we talked about it last week, didn't we?
I was, and you did, yeah, we brought it up. And I was like, let me go check, because I know I was on a wait list or something. And then, like, I just followed up with it. I think I just confirmed, maybe I needed to confirm my email or something again. That I think I saw like a follow up email
Something
that I must have
trivial,
missed.
yeah.
Yeah, and then immediately I was in. So I was like, cool.
Oh,
I'll
nice.
take a look at that in a couple days. And I did in a couple days. And yeah, I mean, I have just one thing to say, man. Podcasting has gotten smarter. I was telling a friend, actually, not only am I excited, I'm also concerned, right? I'm on both sides of it, because
Hmm.
I looked at this, I spent an hour on it, I jumped in, and I said, all right, let me just do the baseline. Again, this is contrary to what we just said, by the way. I totally just jumped in and said, all right, let me follow what I see first, okay? Because I'm in the I
Well, it's
love my
exciting
favorite.
tech,
Well, my
and
favorite
you're
part of a
excited about it.
platform or app or development is breaking it. That's my favorite part. I love the beta stage. I love the
Oh, okay,
test,
yeah, that's a
QA, Q testing. I love it because it's like, oh man, I know we built this amazing thing, but I'm gonna go walk in there and I'm gonna check every window. I'm gonna push against the door. I'm gonna make sure everything is, because oh, you just don't want those headaches later. So I
right,
love
right.
that stuff. So I jump in as a dumb user most times, and I say that lightly and not
You're kind
calling.
of shaking the tree.
I love,
You're like,
yeah. So
there's
let me
some
break the
faults
rules.
here. It's
Let me
not
not do a
perfect. Yeah.
tutorial. Let me not read anything on it. Let me just jump in here and just play with stuff. And so I immediately went in to create a show, a podcast show. And so gave it the baseline stuff, created an image, created a thing. You get to program a voice, tone for your host, or you have or I like that it was an option of you could pick a host, create a host, or mimic, like have it learn your voice, which I thought
Like
is
11 Labs does, which
yeah,
we've talked about
groundbreaking
before.
stuff right there.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, wait a second, I can program it to sound like me, and then I mean,
Just feed it text articles and it sounds just like you. It's that
yeah,
good.
yeah,
It's
and I
that
thought,
good.
and so I did a base run where, and I was showing somebody else. I said, "All right, I just put in this. I gave it a little backstory, yada yada yada." I hadn't leveraged any of my AI yet. I just used the tools that were there. I think the only thing I used was ideogram to make the cover photo because I was like,
Okay.
I don't have a photo available, and I want to make sure I at least upload a photo. So I did all that, and then hit generate audio or hit generate a script, and then generate audio, and I listened to it, and I was like, wow, wow, the potential here is just insane.
Hmm.
And then immediately I was like, and then there's just gonna be immediately the cloud just kind of came out of darkness and said, and then there's gonna be all those people are gonna be like, well, that's AI generated. And I just thought, yeah, but what, I had this question, and this is a good question to kind of just bring into this forum of hopefully when people listen to it, they can chime in on comments or somewhere else that it'd be found. And the question that came to mind was, what isn't AI generated? And I say that in a way that says that for a long time, because I've been in production studios, I've been around heavy recording, I've been in new studios, I've been, I've been around interviews, and what do we see? A lot of times we either see us paper in front of us that guides us through our words. If you're anything like me, I've recited most of my talking points at least 24 hours before a billion times. Or you see a teleprompter. So it's like,
Right, right. A
what's the
politician,
difference?
here
Yeah.
we just had a national election. If a politician, they all have speech writers. I've done
Yep.
speech writing
What?
before in my
Yep.
career.
Absolutely.
Okay, so a vice president or a senator or a presidential candidate walks up to a podium, reads something that someone else wrote off of, is that fraudulent? Is it legitimate? Well, apparently it's legitimate because we've been doing it for centuries,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And
Yep. Preparing speeches, Toastmasters, all these other things wouldn't
right,
exist if we
right.
didn't
So
have
now it's
some
AI.
container.
So I hear your point. It's like people freak out when they learn it's a computer and AI doing it, but
Mhm.
oh, if you hired another human to do it, well, that's totally different.
That's
But
totally okay.
is it
Yeah.
really? Is it
Yeah.
really different? It's just
Right.
taking a tool out of the toolbox and applying it to the challenge, right?
Or I listen to a lot of audiobooks. And for example, the audiobook, if it's not narrated by the original author, it's by a voice, So like, wait, so this author wrote this amazing book and then it was transcribed and then spoken and recorded by a voice actor. And then I'm listening to it. I'm still learning the material. I'm still getting the information I need. Then where are the lines being blurred and how am I going, how would we then
Right.
approach the controversy and judgment? Well, no, you just push past it. So I mean, I just a billion ideas came to mind, right? Because it was like sometimes us as creators, people that are both creators but also influential, we got day jobs. It's hard to sit down and record, let's say 30 minutes of content. You know why? Because it doesn't
Right.
take 30 minutes to record it. It takes like 4 hours. You have to
Exactly.
prepare
Good
it. You have
point.
to,
Good
yeah, it
point.
takes all day. Like a lot of even creators, if you're making video content, for example, you either have entire booking days for the whole month, or you're every day slotting out time where you're like trying to quiet everybody in the house or everybody around you and record all these videos or micro videos. And I just thought, this is totally an evolution of where we are. And
Yeah.
I think the only thing you can question is that, well, did maybe the percentage of AI generated material versus your own words, right? If I write out an outline and then I blow it up in AI and I go over it and revise it a billion times, and then I finally upload it to that to Jellypod to create that episode for me, and I've seen a few tools out there where it's like, what percentage of authenticity is this? Because then I'd be
Right.
like, okay, cool, we have a measure, right? Like somebody could say, okay, of that content, we could say 85% of that is very authentic. It's very written and derived from non-automated language processors. It's somebody behind the wheel. It's like a race. We could watch a bunch of NASCARs go around a track that are fully autonomous with no driver in it.
I
maybe they
would
have a
love that.
maybe they have a
I've got
remote
some cold beer
control.
in the
Yeah.
fridge. If
No,
you're
they're
if
sitting
you're
in the
down for
skybox
doing
with
that.
you and they're just controlling the car. Wow. You know what I mean? Like that could be a thing, but we want to see the guy behind the wheel and manipulating the machine. It's kind of like that,
But
right?
some
Like,
entrepreneur is going to introduce an auto racing series where it's a bunch of 18-year-olds sitting in booths, a couple miles away,
yeah,
controlling the cars. Why not, right? Like the
why not?
Japanese will probably start it, and then we'll act like we invented it as Americans. But yeah, I mean,
Well, we got a taste
well,
for that. I mean, I did when I was a kid. The big arcades, the scarce word of arcades. I don't even know. I know there's barcades here in Vegas, but arcades where they had those like 6 to 8 car things that were strung along against a wall, and everybody was racing each other. It's kind of like that, right? But then you would just take that and
yeah,
televise it,
well,
broadcast it,
it's
or use real cars.
it's really interesting what you're saying here, and I didn't know at what point it would become appropriate for me to tell a little story, but this is one of three podcasts that I do,
Mm,
and the other two podcasts are me taking articles that I write and feeding it to an AI, and
yeah.
I'll be totally transparent. It's Google's Notebook LM. Okay. And NotebookLM does a lot of things. Like everybody's obsessed right now with you can make podcasts with NotebookLM. Yes, you can. And we're going to
Yeah.
talk about that more here. But that's just one of many things that it does. And it really means if that's all you see, that you're not really understanding the tool and all the great things that you can do with it. So just for listeners, your takeaway is NotebookLM does a lot more than just produce these podcast episodes. Now, where Jellypod is trying to leapfrog ahead of Google is in terms of allowing you to adjust the host, because on Notebook LM, you get a middle aged female, a middle aged male. I call them Daphne and Fred
Yeah.
because they don't have names, and they do this thing called the deep dive. And so it's not necessarily branded toward you. If you want to call it something other than a deep dive, well, that's probably not going to work, even though you can play with the prompts. And Ethan Malik and some other AI researchers and experts have done some really neat things with
Hmm.
Notebook LM if you start paying attention. But so I had an AI podcast that I listened to religiously 5 days a week. And it was early in the morning too. Like I had to get up early to do this thing. Guy was in a different time zone.
Yeah.
And at one point, this was just a few weeks ago, Notebook LM made some upgrades to where you could, they called it passing a note. You could pass a note to Daphne and Fred.
Oh,
Again, those are my words, the
yeah.
hosts, and and it works. They don't always follow your instructions, but like you can kind of, it's like a sheepdog, right? And it's not an exact science, but you're just kind of trying to get most of the sheep over here or over here, right? And he was talking about this tool, and then he said, "Oh, but I just wish Google had not made the Daphne and Fred available to the public." It got my attention because I'm using it to produce 2 out of 3 podcasts.
Yeah.
And he's like, because now everybody and their brother is creating some crappy podcast by just feeding text documents to Notebook LM, and he was really very opposed to that idea for some reason. I'm not really sure why. So I unfollowed him. I was like,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I'm just, yeah, I think you're not seeing the big picture here. Then there was also a podcast expert that I was following, and she did the same thing. She put out some posts that were basically like, if you think you're going to be a great podcast creator by just feeding some junk to NotebookLM and they kind of look at this through a negative light, then no, you're not going to. Your stuff is going to suck. And I was like, really?
Mm.
I would like
Mm.
to think my stuff doesn't suck.
Yeah.
Okay, so I unfollowed her too. But my point here is that it is the final product that matters. And this is what
Uh-huh.
you started hitting on, right,
Uh-huh.
with Jellypod, that it is the final product that matters. Most Americans don't know if they've got a six-cylinder or an eight-cylinder under the hood of their car,
Mm.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
like
They have to
typically
put the
they
make,
don't
model,
understand.
and all that in, yeah, to figure it out.
Yeah, they don't get it. What's your bandwidth on your broadband? Most
Mm-hmm.
Americans don't know and don't care, right? I
Yeah.
turn on Netflix and it works. I turn on the weather and it works. My stuff
Right.
works.
Yeah.
That's all they
When
care.
it doesn't
So
work, you go over and bang on the modem like you're an old caveman on a TV. For sure. Yes.
right. So this whole issue that you're tapping into, and I think it's a big one that we're going to be unpacking for months and years to come,
Hmm.
because there's stigma, there's ignorance, there's misperception, there's misinformation, there's the doomers and the fanboys, and it all gets confusing. But how we create the content, whether it's audio, video, or text, doesn't I don't think the average consumer gives a darn about how we create it. So, but if they have a lot of stigma toward AI and they go, oh, this asset was created with AI, whether it's again text, audio, or video, doesn't matter. There's that stigma of thinking it's not legit somehow. You were tapping into this a few minutes ago,
Yeah,
and
well,
uh,
it's it's like a movie, okay? Those same people arguably would then be, as opposed to the level of CGI now in a Star Wars movie or production, than the level of work it took to create CGI. Not like, like to create special effects. That's what it used to be called.
right,
In the early '80s, the late '70s, when the first few movies came out, like Alien, right? Like I almost pay homage to Ridley Scott and the first Alien movie, because when you watch it, you're like, you created that. Whereas like now, it's a lot easier to create that atmosphere that way,
right.
versus all that special effects and all. It was all manual. It was all sets. It was all build.
It was
And
a big
now it's like
deal because it was so hard, and today it's much
so
easier.
hard. So what happened? It got smarter. So like I look at these things and go like, let these words resoundingly live for the rest of history. AI driven tools remove the technical barriers and let creators focus on their message and audience. If anything, you're getting a more authentic and deeper
Ooh, I
message
like
than you would have
that.
gotten before.
More authentic.
Yeah, because like from my experience, the hardest part of podcasting, for example, isn't the talking, it's actually the production grind. It's actually like
Uh-huh.
the
Yeah.
tools and having the right things put together and all the editing and processing and everything you have to put into it. And when you mess up, you mess up. And so it's like it's just, it takes years off your life. It takes money out of your pocket. There's just so
Yep.
much going on there. And what does it do? Eventually you just quit. It's so there's arguably saying there's people in there that have stayed in the fight and have earned their place. And those people will always be in that place. But I can tell you right now that they're also leveraging new AI and tools. And you know why? Because most people at the top of their game in podcasting or video production or whatever, they don't do that cutting floor stuff very much anymore. They are pushing it off to an
Yep.
editor. They're putting it off to a processor, to another person that is using probably the most latest tools to get it to you in a fast way. Like we're talking what have taken a week to process and edit down, 4 or 5 days. We talked about this even before, right? With the article writing, it's now like I'll get that to you tomorrow. I'll get to you by the end of the day, because you have tools in place, right? Like I'm using even Photoshop these days, or Lightroom. It's like I have now that post processing time comes down, and guess who saves in the end of that? depending on what kind of software you're using, right, is the customer. Because what we used to pay by hour for editing or post processing, which was also limited, right? Like, I'll give you 10 really good polished photos of the 100 photos we took, and that's going to take me a long time to do. Whereas now it's like
Right.
I can have that done by the end of the day, and it's going
Yep.
to save us time and money, and it's going to get you out there faster, right? So everything comes back to mindset. It's like, just it lets us skip these headaches and just drive straight into connecting with our listeners. And if that means that I had to leverage a tool like Jellypod or, NotebookLM or anything to get there faster, to diversify my message. Like, for example, me, I had a hard time articulating in the beginning what I do. Now let's transcend that to content. If I just focus on one piece of content, totally, I could be that guy in that subject matter to be the expert and the person you go to. The thing is, I'm just such a chaotic person that I chase down everything I do and learn, and I'm an expert in a lot of things, and I know that's hard to swallow. But if you ran a mile with me, and I don't mean like a physical mile, but if you ran a mile with me, which means that you spent a week with me in my creative genius, I would exhaust you. You would be, how does it get done? Any person that's ever spent longer than a few days with me, I've been in containers and leadership groups where we're doing a 100-day challenge and we're on calls every day. And they like sit back and later on they go, I don't know how you do what you do. I'm like, a lot of caffeine and nobody loves me. No, I'm kidding. Like, it's so much work.
Oh boy.
Whereas it's became, you know what it's given me back? These AI tools and things, it's giving me back my quality of life. I get to spend more time with my kids. I get to spend more time thinking things I love. I get to spend more time like out in my
Back to
backyard,
efficiency. You're
because
more efficient, dude,
I'm
because you
getting
use
my
AI
quality of
tools.
life back though too. It's like, and again,
Nice,
skips the
nice.
headaches, like,
That's a
because I'm able to do that production in just such short amount of time. So for example, even Jellypod, and even for, what's cool and what people are now trying to seek, which is how do I make money in this? The monetization level that I looked at so far that I haven't even got into is a game changer for Jellypod, because they have dynamic ad insertion and better sound leveling, which means that smaller podcasters can even deliver professional content and generate revenue.
right.
Like, what is that? That's what's all we've seen in the last 4 years. Is everybody like this alleged side hustle mentality, or they're becoming creators? This is just another
Hmm.
tool. I think for those people that you unfollowed, um,
Yeah,
it's because they feel threatened, right? It's the same thing we've been talking
I
about
think
innovation.
so.
It's because it's
Yeah.
the same thing we've been talking about in the big companies, where they're like, "Is it going to take over my role?" It's like
Hmm.
anything can take over what
Yeah.
you're doing. So always challenge yourself to
It's a
be
constant
2 steps
grind,
ahead.
always changing.
Man, you cannot get comfortable. Like, comfort dies. It
Yeah,
kills
yeah,
you.
that's a good point. Good point.
So I like this platform so far. I haven't even got to stretch his legs yet, but I like what we're keying on here. It's bigger than that. It's bigger than the AI revolution. It's bigger than, breaking the barriers and LM, and it's all part of it. Don't get me wrong. I think we were
Yeah,
going to segue into 11 Labs, which is also huge in breaking the language barriers in AI, right? So like we're getting into now this other stuff, which is translation and interpretation, and I want you to talk about it because I know that you brought that one up. But it's like, once I started traveling that one, I was like, oh my god, this is just another part of it. It's another facet of it. And so,
yeah.
Jellypod,
You
and
can,
is there anything we want to close on Jellypod or Notebook LM? Because I haven't even jumped into Notebook LM yet. I know you told me about it. I have an account. Um, I feel like this is gonna, it's gonna take up my next 2 weeks, but in a good way.
right,
You know?
right. And what, and I use Notebook LM on the daily, like I say, to produce two podcasts. And it is limited compared to something like Jellypod simply because, well, in marketing, you differentiate, right? You want something that's unique. That's always the goal. We don't always achieve it. We often look like the other guy, but you're trying to achieve something that's unique. Well, if there's 1,000 other podcasters out there using Notebook LM and just like me, not able to adjust the voices, well, they've all got Daphne and Fred too,
Yeah.
right? And from a marketing perspective and sales, this is a nightmare. This is like, oh
Mm,
my God, we can't do it that way. And I think that's exactly why you've got 11 labs and you've got Jellypod, and there's going to be 100 more companies in the next 6 months that are going to jump into this. And the good news is also for people like me who use Notebook LM, well, do you think Google's not going to update that stuff? They've already updated it. They made a major update to it. They took it out of beta. The functionality is increasing, and they're not stupid. They know that people like you and I want to be able to go in there and tweak the voices. They know that Jellypod is there, and all these other companies are emerging. They know that much better than we do. But the efficiency of 11 Labs, there's one podcast that it's an AI podcast that I still listen to because he didn't call me an idiot for using NotebookLM. And well, here's how I learned about 11 Labs. I'm listening to him, and he does like this news wrap up, and I love that he makes it short. He realizes we don't have spare time, and he just cranks this stuff out fast and efficient. And part of that efficiency is he does a news wrap up where you're actually listening to him, and then not always, but sometimes he'll be talking about back to the proverbial 260 page report, right? He'll have
Mm,
some long document he wants to, and he'll be totally transparent and say, I'm going to hand this over to 11 Labs. And then bam, you're listening to him again, and it sounds just like him. If he didn't tell me, I would think it was him. But out of consideration to busy professionals, he increases the speed. I don't know. I think he takes it to like 1.25 or 1.5.
yeah,
Uh, so you get a little more value for your time, right? And he reads the report, and I'm like, if he hadn't told me, I would think that was him, just
that's
with a lot of
cool.
coffee in him, right? Like
Yeah,
he just,
yeah.
yeah, he's a FedEx guy. He's reading fast, but I can't tell it's 11 Labs. Most people, when they hear Notebook LM and Daphne and Fred, they can't tell it's an AI, and that's
It's a
kind of a
really good one.
magical
Yeah.
that's a magical point we've gotten to when the average consumer was like, what? I wasn't listening to humans. But
Especially if you're like
again,
me, where I listen to it like on 1.2, 1.5, two times, depending on your voice, how you deliver.
right.
Whereas like I don't care. Am I getting the information right? Like, and I think that that's all that matters sometimes.
Back
And
to efficiency.
and I want to get back to that point of the person of what did you say? You said oh my gosh. Oh, that now there's just a bunch of crap podcasts out there.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
hey, here's a thing that's going to shake up your world. There's a lot of crap podcasters out there. Period. Like, and I love, and
Regardless of the tools they
regardless, and I'm
use,
not going to
it's
say that
just crap.
there's a lot of people shooting for the fences, and I'm not saying that in such a judgmental or discard way. I'm just saying at the end of the day, if you followed a podcast and then it died after a season because it didn't get the traction, right? We have even had our own experience with this. It's a there's was a magic wasn't taking, the message wasn't getting clear, something was
Yep.
happening, we weren't advertising correctly. It doesn't matter either way. And I say crap subjectively. There's just a lot of stuff out there. So I think as us as people, we get to kind of weed through that and find the things that we like. And so who cares who's putting out what, where, whatever. If you don't want to listen to it, don't subscribe. If you don't want to listen to it, don't follow. Like, but go and start
Yeah.
lynch partying
Yeah.
people. It's like that's not good. Like we want to create, we want to innovate. Like if anything, it's going to up your game. Maybe you want to take a vacation for a month, but you have a rigorous schedule. Well, maybe you could fill in every other week with one of these AI ones trained on your voice,
Exactly.
still
That's the
your
kind of
message.
creative
You know what I mean?
thinking, yeah, that
Um,
is a difference between being able to do it at all and saying, crap, I just don't have the time. I got a 2 year old, I got an 8 year old, I got a
yeah,
mortgage, I
get
got an
sick.
ex-wife, yeah, I just do not have the bandwidth if I want to get 8 hours of sleep every night. And if you can leverage that AI tool to make the impossible possible,
Hmm.
well, that is kind of special. And I'm not trying to be a fanboy, but that's a powerful tool in my book.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's like back in the day when we all first discovered Microsoft Word or email attachments. It's like, damn, this is going to help me get some stuff done really, really efficiently.
It will. I think 11 Labs also their advancements are like in text to speech and translation are gonna bridge the gaps in the global communication. There's a lot of breakdown there, and there has been
Yes,
for a long
yes,
time, right? So like you can create
yeah,
content and provide customer service or anything that you could be across all languages. That this tech is making that possible. And I have a decent amount of clients that prefer some of those things to be native, for example. For example, if you have an American company that's American made and you make American products, they don't outsource, customer service. They want it here in America, right? And that's
Right.
kind of like a limitation a bit, because then you're like, well, cost effective wise, right? If you have stakeholders, investors, or other people involved in your
Right.
business, like you're gonna look at it and go, but we could save like so much more money and get, and I just think that there's parts of this where you go, okay, this could be used other ways, and or shorten the gaps or the things that are going to be, I guess, some things are the pain points in business.
Right.
And if you have a global product, one of the biggest things that's hard is translating that message across global, economies or global markets. You end up having this game where you have to go, and I remember when we were back, 10 years ago, we were making product manuals. It's not just taking the manual and plugging it into a translator and with spitting out, and you go, okay, cool, print that. No, it's the same way. Like if you walk around China and you have, I loved it. Even my travels 7 years ago, 8 years ago, when I was walking around Shenzhen, and a lot of it's in Chinese. It's, that's not an American adoptive city. You go to Shanghai, you go to Beijing, definitely some English and Chinese
Right.
signs and some translation. But you go to Shenzhen, I mean, that's the capital of electronics, but you shouldn't be there unless you're really doing business and or live there or know people. So walking around there, there was not very much like, dual language support, right? So I either had to pick up as much as I could, which I did, studied to at least learn the key 100 words to get me by. Had good friends there, so of course I was always practicing, or I had people there to could translate, which is important. Or I used to, if I wanted to venture out by myself, I'd walk around that, and Google Translator had this cool feature
Oh,
where you
neat.
could put your camera on a sign and it would translate it. uh I could tell you right now that those translations were not good, right? Because those words, the way that they form them, are not the way that we understand them in English. And so it would just give you the baseline, right? Like if the symbol meant pig, it was like, you know, pig instead of pork or something. You'd have to. I don't have examples because it was like then. Where I'm just saying, like now, I think that headache would be different because it's actually gonna, it's gonna translate it in a way that's a little bit more natural. It's kind of like Spanish, right?
Right.
Everything's almost in the form of a question when you translate it in English. It's kind of backwards, like Yoda speak, and
Right.
people are
Right.
like, so you have to learn that those, the phonetic, architecture around language and how words are positioned, and it's complicated. But if you when with really good linguistic learning models with Notebook LM or 11 Labs, and how they're working with text to speech and translation, it's like that kind of like that whole gap is going to close up, and we're going to be able to
Yeah.
speak with people in a way that
Yeah.
helps allows us to travel the world easier, and not
True.
feel so
It'll
at
be
a
like Star
deficit.
Trek. It'll be,
Yeah,
and I grew up on that series, and now we're actually going to see it manifest
translator.
in the same
Yeah,
lifetime. And it's
yeah.
just amazing to see. Well, I remember when the Apple Watch first came out, and everybody was citing Dick Tracy, which probably nobody knows what it is, right? Uh,
Yes.
but it was a comic strip, and I apologize, I didn't research this before the episode today, but I think it was in the 1930s, 1940s
Way
was Dick
back.
Tracy.
The original,
And
yes.
anyway, yeah, he had a watch very similar to an Apple Watch, and it had an antenna coming out of it, and allowed him to do video conferencing and to take phone calls, and it was like his killer tool,
Hmm.
right? And to see that actually happen in my lifetime, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I think a lot of these AI tools are offering that same mechanism or phenomena of something goes from fiction and science fiction to reality, to a real product or service that you could pay someone money for and have it affect the way you do business. That's pretty heavy, you know?
Yeah, I think if people really wanted to focus on things like that, um, or if you want to be haters about something in AI, they, I think they focus on the ethical side of things, right? So like as if they're consuming media, if they're consuming content and or looking at companies, I would just look at the ethical side or the ultra realistic AI voices, like to see to make sure that they're they're meeting up, because like and I speak as leaders, right? We have to navigate these waters carefully already, right? With what is the
Yeah.
purpose behind this, or did somebody build this for an unethical or ethical, practice?
Am I
And
stealing everyone's copyright?
yeah,
That's been
yeah.
an
So
issue late
avoiding
recently. A lot of
misuse, right?
lawsuits in play right
Yeah.
now.
So
Yeah,
yeah, so I
copyright
think
infringement, intellectual property. This is all important stuff, right? Like
yeah.
society has to have this stuff worked out in order to run smoothly. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes.
Well, it's one thing to say that this thing you're saying is just something you're saying versus this thing I'm saying I created. It's like, oh no, that's where we teeter into some, other parts of it, that you start claiming ownership of something that maybe isn't yours, and then you use it in a way that broadcasts it out to people that are less knowing, and making it seem, so it's looking for those. So I'd say, if anything, if people are concerned about the authenticity of content or things, just, it goes back to, like, do your own research, do your homework, make sure that you're following people or companies or brands that at least have some credibility or some ethical sides. You're seeing this a lot. You're seeing a lot
Yeah,
in, oh, what was the biggest thing lately was the job market of the last 2 years, and how much there's these, like, kind of like fake job postings and job listings that get you,
right.
because, like, the remote work became great, right? But what happens with remote work? Well, I can tell you from my personal experience, I am cautiously handing over a lot of my own physical information, my personal information, that otherwise you wouldn't just hand over digitally. Think about an onboarding in the job, right? You fill out your employee stuff, and so it's your social security number, it's your address, it's all this stuff and information on yourself. Well, now put that container out into the ether of technology, cloud based, and or running through text or things, because they're becoming normal, right? People are communicating. You can kind of confirm job interviews and different stuff through text. You can do it through email. And what happened was, or what is still happening, is some really nefarious people, about the same situation what people woke up to about chainmail. You remember the old email letters that you used to get? We started in snail mail, then it went to email, which was the spam that created
True.
this
Yeah.
this magic Willy Wonka-esque style opportunity. Oh, you have a old relative that passed away and they left you their estate, but you didn't know it because they're a long lost relative, and blah blah. And you're like, oh my God, yes, give me that $5 billion. Oh, I just have to give you my bank account and you'll deposit the funds. Okay, no problem, right? No.
Oh,
Well,
ow.
that same model has gone into the job industry. So you get
Yeah,
job listings that are on job postings, or job listings that are on certain job boards that send you down a rabbit hole, or your information, or say you're an active job seeker right now, and there's a lot, and you're getting preyed on because all your information got stolen. You know what you'd be worried about? People are worried about all these big data breaches. What you should be worried about in those data breaches is not that your social security number is taken, and not that your personal identity is taken, or somebody can take your credit cards and banks. Yes, they could. And you should very much be aware that if you were in a data breach that was part of, you got to look at the data breach itself. What was exposed? Well, sometimes it's just password and email. Sometimes it's your date of birth and your address. Okay, well, those things are somewhat readily available in most, like, searches
hmm,
online. Public data is very much more accessible these days than it ever has. I mean, you could pull
right,
somebody's criminal history with a 14.99 membership to peoplesearch.net or whatever crap, right? So there's a lot of stuff like that where you can at least get the baseline information. Account numbers and all that, they're only as useful as if they have usually what we you need to extract those funds, which is either passphrases, security keys, authenticator codes, validating your phone number, having your phone and your, so the level of complexity
right,
to get hacked is still very much complicated. However, if I wanted to exploit you and I knew that you were looking for a job and I came across your information and I have your phone number, email address, your home address, and enough about you to put together a profile to say, well, I could target you for a fake job listing, and I could
right,
probably string you along. And if you're dumb enough, and I may say dumb in a kind way, to give over your information so freely without validating that company, without validating where it's coming from, looking at the encryption of the form you're filling out or whatever, that stuff's happening, right? It's the same
right.
thing with some of this tech. Is there's exploitations that can be done, and so we got to be a little bit more on guard these days. I think
for
AI is going
sure.
to help with that in the future. I think AI is going to come in and build tools that will siphon that out. I just wish it would still kill all these spam calls I'm getting every day and text messages telling, like, I just got two while we were on the call right now. I can screenshot them and
Wow.
include them later. I got two. One says, let's go have coffee this afternoon from a 901 area code. And the other one just says hello from a 424 area code.
It's afternoon. Wow, the assumption there. Like
So I just
you're
immediately
my
swipe
sexy girlfriend
left.
from
Yeah.
high school, and I'm just going to drop everything to run out and look at you all afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah, but the attention hungry person or somebody, maybe lonely or not knowing or
Right.
expecting where the next message may come
They're
from
vulnerable.
will
Yeah.
go through that process. I just go and
Yeah.
swipe left and delete and move it to junk. You know what I've been doing? I don't know if you've experienced this on LinkedIn. I've been getting comments of people to invite me to connect with them. Have you been getting that? This might be a little diversion from where we are. Um,
Um,
but yeah, I'll
no,
post an
no, I haven't
article
seen that.
and I get a message, I get a comment on the article, and what it says
Okay.
is this: send me a connection invite, or let's connect, something like that, right? Send me a connection, with stars and hearts or something like
Well,
that every
and
now and then.
it's such BS because all they should do is send you a connection request themselves. Like it's
Totally.
just ridiculous, right? It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Totally. So I'm just like,
But
where's the filtering in this?
yeah,
That's my point. I was trying to bring it back to AI. Is like, we're still not there yet. Also, in some areas, that I would love to see
right.
improve, which is capturing this rogue comment that ending up on my article within. I want to say within the first minute too. It's usually pretty quick. It's
Well,
not like 30 minutes later. It's like within the first minute, somehow it's on there. I'm gonna write an article about it because I think that people fall for that. They'll go
well,
and
and
connect with that person.
bots can do that, right?
Mhm.
Humans don't always respond that quickly, but bots can
Yeah.
respond that quickly. And for those listeners who are not aware, Microsoft has owned LinkedIn for the past 8 years. They purchased them in 2016.
Hmm.
So take what you will, good or bad, from that. But I always like knowing who owns the stuff I'm using, right? Like, is General
So
Motors
important.
a Chinese company now? Like, where does my
Yep.
money go? Who am I fueling? Who am I giving power to? So I haven't run into that particular question, but or issue, but
Yeah.
there's definitely scammers on every platform, right? So whether it's X or Threads or Blue Sky or LinkedIn, there's bad guys there, people, and don't be shocked by the bad guys because of
Yeah.
course the back to what we've talked about in previous episodes, the bell curve, right? And the bottom 20%, we don't even want to talk about them because they're just scum. And the top
Mhm.
20%, well, they're Nobel Prize winners and maybe going to save the earth. We'll see, right? But
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's still a bell curve. So I'm just kind of amazed when people you know, get a phishing scam in their inbox or some other fraudulent activity, and they're just like, "Oh my God, how could they do that?" And it's like, well, what do you mean? There's been bad people since day one,
Yeah.
right? Like
For
we lived in
sure.
caves and could barely make fire, and there were good people and bad people. And watch yourself around the bad people. Protect yourself. Be ever vigilant. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think your story is a great example of that. It's like, oh yeah, there's people that will just rob you blind if you allow them to.
Yeah. And that was my tangent for the week. Let's all we can circle back to. It's all relative, I think, to the AI and tech. It's sometimes it's I guess it's a question at mine today, which is like, what is what well, sometimes the big companies, right? We talk about small companies all the time. We talk about startups. We talk about companies that are moving needles, and some of them are big, some of them are
Hmm.
small, right? NotebookLM is big. Jellypod, not backed by a big company, but good, big, up and coming and amazing, and might even get snatched up, might even buy up. Who knows? Um,
Right,
but um, sometimes even the big companies, I'm going, hey, why didn't you think of that? Why didn't you think of this? Why is this still a problem for me as a user? When these guys over here, space traveling, and you can't stop this weirdo from trying to connect with me on my
right,
phone or
right.
my comments. I'm like, this, the AI probably would have solved this by now. Like, this is
Yeah,
crazy. There's markers here to look for. I don't know. I picked it up, and I'm a human, right? I've gotten five, six in the last 2 days of two articles. Um, there's a pattern. That's it. At the end of the day, that's a pattern. Like, like, okay, like now I would just stick my AI on that. look for this pattern constantly in user activity, because that's even back in the day. What was that called? That was called shilling, right? If we
Right.
were automatically posting or using bots to post and comment and things on different people's profiles, and it was within a short capture time, like it's unrealistic that I'm watching the feed as it's going in real time. Even right now,
Right.
I'd have to refresh the page. So that's impossible. So you always got to look at the impossible. And I think that's where I want to zero it back to, when it seems too good to be true, or maybe too impossible, then maybe that's where you tap into the ethical side of any of these AI tools. But to be a hater right off just because it might threaten your throne that you sit on, um,
Hmm.
isn't
Hmm.
exactly like the best foot forward. And at the end of the day, they just lost a follower. And I know sometimes when people are like, "Oh, it's fine, leave." It's like,
Well,
no,
yeah. And I
no.
wasn't trying to be that sensitive jerk in the room, right? I
Hey,
wasn't.
that's
Hey,
negative speak. You don't need to take that in. I mean,
it's just a way of
it's
making money.
limiting.
It's
Yeah,
just my
yeah.
career. But
It's limiting to you, and that's not. We shouldn't be saying that message. Like, let's not
well,
shut people
and
down.
hundreds or thousands or millions of other people who are using tools like this might not be the exact same tool. Who cares, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But who are using AI tools to produce marketing assets and content collateral.
Mhm.
And to just kind of offhandedly say, "Oh, you're a bunch of goofballs, you're a bunch of idiots." It's, again, the bell curve. Don't judge 100% of them by the nefarious activities of the bottom 10%,
Yeah,
because that's just stupid math, right?
yeah.
It's just a dumb way of looking at life. So yeah, it's kind of interesting how, regardless of their age, regardless of their industry segment, people are kind of taking sides, right? But
Mm.
back to what you said, psychologically, what I think is going on is they're being defensive, right? They're like, "Ooh, I don't want that robot replacing my job, so I'm going to say that robot's a dick." Screw that robot. Yeah, the
Yeah,
robot sucks, and I'm going to give you 12 reasons why it sucks and why you should not listen to the robot.
yeah.
Uh, you know, tools in the toolbox. But we are over the hour here,
Hmm.
so depending on your schedule, I think we should shut it down. I had this is how deep we go, listeners, dear listeners. This is how much we love you. I only had 3 bullet points on
Hmm.
my discussion list today, and we covered one of them. We covered Jellypod and 11 Labs. I also want to talk about the Mac Mini and Blue Sky a little. Blue
Yeah.
Sky's been in the press a whole lot. So if you've got the time, John, we'll wrap this episode and we'll put the discussion about Blue Sky and Mac Mini in the bonus episode and go from there.
Let's do it. That's fine.
All right, man. Well, thank you. You have been listening to the Curt and John Talk Tech and AI podcast. We love to talk about biz tech and AI and help you do your job better by introducing you to new and powerful tools. If you like what you heard today, please hit subscribe, and we'll come to you every week with more information to help your career.